think it's normally got a slight delay on LinkedIn Live.
Yep. Well, let's just double check here. Yeah, so it should start. I'm just waiting to see it on LinkedIn. No, I'm not seeing it. Still says pre-live.
Mm-hmm.
It is, if I remember rightly, it's been a while since I've gone live, but I do think it is a minute or two behind.
There we go. Okay, so it looks like it's waiting for host to start.
So we've got some people logging in here. I'm not seeing it live from the feed, but I hear myself, so I'm somewhere.
Now, Priya, when we had set this up and we wanted to make sure that we were live,
Yeah, we did.
But it sounds like, or it looks like.
We are live. Actually, we are live on YouTube, on LinkedIn. And I'm seeing, yeah, we got a couple folks here with us. So,
perfect.
That's good.
Welcome everybody. Yeah, we'll hang tight for a minute or two just to make sure we can catch.
I'm seeing 11 people on the LinkedIn Live right now.
I'm still on pre-live, so I'm not sure why I'm not seeing it. Maybe because I'm on Restream. I'm not sure.
Could the people in the audience who have tuned in already just let us know if you can see us or hear us?
And let me double check that we are showing our chat. Yep. Okay. So we've gotten a couple chat messages here. Yeah, I think we're ready to go. Yeah.
All right. And you're recording as well, Brian, right?
Yep. We're streaming. We're live. So we're ready to go. Excellent. Yeah, we got 12 people here right now. I got a couple odd things that I'm working through here between the LinkedIn Live and what we can see on Restream, but we're getting it figured out. Lewis and Priya, we are at 7:30, 8:30 local Eastern, 8:31 actually. So I think we could kick off. Are you guys ready to go? I can give a couple opening statements and then we can get right into it. Sound good?
Yeah.
Lewis, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, that works for me.
So pretty exciting topics here, folks. ChatGPT, citizen development, current state of data science. For those of you in the audience, there's a few. I'm going to actually go ahead and give you a link to Restream. If you want, the first few of you can join us there as well. That'll give you a chance to be with us in the showroom. What we're looking to talk about is really get into the details of what we're seeing with generative AI and citizen development. Data science continues to evolve with these topics. So it's an excellent topic today to get into with Lewis and Priya. So I'm going to go ahead and put the link into the chat for everybody. And then Lewis, if you'd like to continue, and then Priya, maybe you can move us into some of those first topics, please.
Absolutely. Hello, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, we welcome a few people onto the panel by joining the restream. So absolutely. Thanks, Louis, for suggesting and Brian for pulling this through. So Brian and I were discussing about Gen AI one day, and we kind of brought up the topic that, all the buzz about the Gen AI, the question comes up, what is it that we can do? We are hearing jobs will be lost. We need to kind of start upskilling. We need to find new ways of one, building more products with it and making ourselves orient ourselves to the new environment where chat GPT, like an example, and the broader piece, the Gen AI technology can be used productively into analytical products in the future. So the question I had was, what kind of education, what kind of awareness or data literacy, or I wouldn't say data literacy particularly, but just some kind of literacy training do we need to build within us? When we see LinkedIn, and for those who are looking at the job postings, I heard that LinkedIn had a 79% increase in job opportunities, which had Chat GPT is one of the requirements. The question is, do they really want Chat GPT? Do they want Gen AI? How do we kind of make the distinction, and how do we, as the workers, the people interested in looking for new projects, think about the skills that are required? So I would like to focus on that while we go through this topic. And at this point, I'll kind of hand it over to Louis. Did you want to say additional ideas or thoughts on this?
Well, thanks, Priya. Firstly, I just want to kind of revert back a little bit and thank you both for setting this up. I launched a platform for data leaders back earlier this year, which has ultimately brought you two together. And I think it's really exciting to see these kind of conversations happening and now kind of evolving into these panel style chats and bringing people in from outside of the community to discuss these topics. Just to touch on your point, I have seen the increase in a desire to advertise ChatGPT on job descriptions and people that are kind of looking for roles that encompass that in some way. It brings me back to 5 or 6 years ago when data was the sexy word of the hour and everyone was looking for data and trying to figure out what it was, how they implement it. And I still think we're trying to figure that out in many different places, trying to really level the understanding of what that means. And I think the same is going to happen here. It's going to take a period of time to really truly understand how we can implement this to real use cases within businesses once the hype, I'm not saying it's going to die off because it's definitely here to stay, but once it's not being talked about as much, how we start to really truly understand what that means for business. So where do we start? How do we figure out whether hiring managers actually know what they're looking for, businesses know what they're looking for? It's good to figure out where you start those types of kind of discovery processes. What questions should you be asking? Do those skills exist yet across the board? So I can give my perspectives from the seat of a recruiter in terms of what I'm seeing, but certainly excited to hear from both of you in detail on the technical side, what's really happening.
Brian, did you want to?
That's excellent, Louis. There are 2 individuals who've joined us. I'm going to let them join us here on video, Richard and Chad. So thank you both. I think they'll be joining us here in a moment.
Good to see you both.
And then we did have some more chats. All right, good. So Richard, you are live as well with us. Excellent. Anything that you'd like to share or add, Richard?
He's with us in spirit.
He's with us in spirit. So we'll stand by with that.
So I think they're having problems connecting. So Brian, I would like us to start the discussion till Richard is getting set up. What were your initial thoughts that you wanted to opine on during this discussion? What were the questions that you were asking?
So one of the common themes that I see is how do we optimize our use of all of these different tools? We have tools that are coming so quickly. ChatGPT 3.5, 4.0. We have things like Snowflake. There's different pieces of OpenAI that are available through many different producers, both low code and citizen development tools. It's really becoming an open marketplace, a brand new market, and it's changing so quickly. It's kind of hard to keep up, but it's also interesting to see how do we productize these things. So, Priya, you and I have had an interesting chat about some of these, but Louis, it's probably very interesting from your angle as well. My space at work, we're a utility company, so looking at how do we give folks access to the data, how do we let people do citizen development? It's very foreign. It's unique, it's odd, and so they wonder, well, what does that mean? How do we control it the right way?
Hey, Brian, would it be good to kind of define what you mean by citizen development? So that way we
can, that's great. So the concept there, that's great, Priya. So the concept there would be, can we let someone create their own report, even if they're not part of IT, even if they're not part of the tech area? So if they're a business person and they want to slice the data, do we give them access to the data so that they can manipulate it, so that they can work with it, so they can create their own views? Is that something that we do only in Tableau or only in Power BI? Or do we allow them to have access to the system of record or to Snowflake? So there's just a lot of different ways that we can look at it and see what is the right way to work with this.
So from that point of view, are you considering citizen development to be a free play, like everybody is in the market, it's like a free competition, and you develop your report, but shouldn't there be a data governance on the back end that allows them to build? Let's just focus on BI, the use of self-service as a part of the citizen development program to build reports, and reports being the product, and there it is being channeled or using ChatGPT. So you go and set up your request and build your report, and it's pulling the data that is giving it back to you. So one of the things I would think is, one, the access which should have been managed beforehand. So even if you're not in, say, well, I did work in identity and fraud. So even if I was in identity and fraud, but I was creating a report, which is a financial report, I should not have that ability. And part of the business rules within the ChatGPT or the genAI, well, not, I wouldn't say genAI, the model that is running behind it should have these constraints and limitations, right? And so, yes, you can develop it, but you may not be able to run it.
So I think you're spot on, Priya. It's how do we make it sustainable? So if someone who's not a developer develops it, then once they release it, who manages that released code? Does IT manage that released code? Or does the business or whomever created it, someone in operations, manage that released code? And then what is our control for allowing that code to be released? So some things that we've talked about are, let's use the same governance that we would say if we had a platform team that controlled release, and then we had different product teams who are working on different parts of the product. That platform team, that release team would set the governance, would have the guardrails, and all the developers in their product areas would code for their space. When they're working to get their code released, it has to pass through those quality gates, DevOps. If it passes through those quality gates fine, then it's released. Then it's maintained just like any other code. So there's definitely pieces that need to be worked out and
So
figured
yeah.
out. But
So I want to
yeah.
put on my data science hat because that is where my core I come from, and I can see this. So many years back when predictive modeling became very rampant, and there was a lot of everybody was building one model after the other, and it was like the versioning, the same kind of a governance. So you have the model development (MRM) processes which are trying to capture the flow, the inputs, the final creation of the model, the metrics, the performance. And there's a governance around it, very strict governance, and regulations that kind of required that you maintain that governance. So, and then you had the development of, code in different languages by the data science community. And people decided to build GitHub, which was a public resource, but every company decided to create a more of a centralized repository for the code. And the versioning was kind of managed by the governance. So do you think that this may be similar as what we would do with these new citizen development products and tools that get generated?
So that's a great question. I'm actually going to bounce that back to Lewis for a second, because I'd like to hear, Lewis, what are your thoughts sitting from your position as you're working? What would be your thoughts in that space? Because I think the risk, Priya, is if I am the only person to right? I think that's always the challenge is if just because you're the leader, just because you're in the seat, and in this question, Priya, you're asking me, but if I were the CIO and I'm the only one making those decisions, then we're really not listening to in the sense, the citizens. So, Lewis, do you have a thought on that, or?
So this plays a big and I am slightly concerned just from the perspective of having free run at things when it comes to data, and then just not being able to like truly manage and keep things in one place with guidelines that make sense, that align with the business. I think it's probably, the question is a little tricky for me to answer as a recruiter, just because I'm not involved in that particular part of the process. So I don't think I could give a definitive answer or perspective on that question, just because it's slightly outside the realms of what I do. I hope that's okay. I'm keen to see it on that.
Fine.
From a learning perspective, what your views are. I know I'm kind of bouncing it off me back to you, but I'm not sure that I'm the best person to answer that question.
So let's open it up.
So let me give a quick response. And then what I'm thinking, Lewis, is from your perspective as a recruiter, what are the developers saying? And then Priya, I'm wondering from your leadership position in the space where you are today, what are you hearing boots on the ground? Because I've had some conversations myself. We're scared of running fast with generative AI and running fast with citizen development. We're scared that can lead us to bad code. It can lead us to, loose ends where we have more tech debt. But we're also excited because it's really that state where IT is really more so serving the business. So it's kind of a two-edged sword, and we want to test the waters a little bit, try some things, see what happens, and then look at larger opportunities. Lewis, does this come up in recruiting? Do you hear folks ask about how are we using generative AI, or how could they get access to some of the code or some of the account information, or whatever the operations are?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see a massive push for businesses talking about it. Whether they're using it or not is another question on things that you actually end up seeing in the public eye. I think we're still very much in an exploratory phase as well. So conversations are happening. I think the same with data, though. You kind of need to focus on smaller use cases, things that you can actually make an impact on quickly before you then start introducing it to a wider business. I think there's still a long process that we've got ahead of us that needs to build trust within an organization before you could really let it loose. So I think there's a lot of smaller introductions that are happening within businesses that just you don't hear as much of, little projects where they're introducing these types of approaches and tools. But I haven't seen any businesses that are really, really driving this forward aggressively, because I don't know if they're waiting for other people to figure out whether they should do it or not. At least on the kind of the mid to startup size businesses that I support, it's more at a conversation level at this point.
So, as a recruiter, then, are you hearing this? Or I would say, if I were applying for a job, one, if it's not a development, I can use ChatGPT. Why do I need to know coding? Why are you emphasizing the need for Python skills when I can use these tools to create, it's like doing InfoStack, right? Googling and finding out the information you want. I have a tool that's a self-service tool that's been installed, and I'm able to, hey, John, welcome, that we can have something automatically check, generate, and create the code. Then from a recruiter's point, would the job definition change? Because now I don't need to know level 3, a advanced level of coding. I can just be happy with just be able to look at it and say, hey, yeah, it looks good.
It's very rare that I'm ever engaged just to find someone who writes code and doesn't do anything else. There's normally more nuances to just a standard development role than just writing code. So I haven't seen that conversation come up at all in the chats that I've been having, because I'm looking for things on top of being able to code that might entail communicating with stakeholders within a business as an additional skill, just on top of the coding. It could be about building teams, mentoring people, that a tool like this can't do.
No, but I'm just saying, with the emphasis, will the emphasis change? And that's what I'm just looking.
Yeah, potentially. I think
hey, John, you want to chime in?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so hey, cool to catch this stream. It's so I work in information security, so I specialize in application security and logging. So in the enterprise, Splunk is a big data platform that's used very frequently across the Fortune 500, 100. And so I also stream on Twitch. Like I'm an old school developer, but now I've been disconnected from software development for so many years, so I'm not really an expert at anything. But I've been dipping my toe into like Node.js, and I found an automation platform called Node-RED, which is basically built on top of Node.js. So what I've done is in ChatGPT, I got plugin development access, and I developed a Splunk plugin. So now I can do natural language questions on my Splunk data, which is kind of cool. Like I can say, tell me what indexes I have and what kind of data is in the index. And it allows me to do natural language questions on data. So the next step for me because I can dive in and do the software development, but I'm trying to develop like the citizen development. I haven't heard that term before, but I just did some Googling about it, and bringing the ability to do logic flows in complex ways with so many, divergent systems to bring that data and information together through APIs. So the next thing I'm going to do is basically, so with Node-RED, it's the flow structures are just, it's like a playbook style, like if you've seen other playbook style flow editors, but you can develop your own modules, and it's just the description for that is just a chunk of JSON. And already ChatGPT can spit out accurate logic flows. So once you develop the API integrations, you can just ask ChatGPT, generate me a Node-RED flow to do this, and generate a Splunk search to return a chart showing this, for example. And I'll be putting this stuff out there on GitHub as well for those who want to try out the Splunk plugin and stuff like that. But so yeah, I've been dipping my toes in some of the topics you're talking about. So I thought I'd stop in.
So John, what would you say if somebody else, Brian developed a similar software and similar capability and put it on GitHub? So the question that we're asking is, you put it there, who's taking it forward, who's versioning? Is it more like open source that it just kind of floats there and there is no governance? Or when you do it for a company specific to a certain use case, as we took up the business intelligence report, what do you think, who should be responsible, right, Brian? I think that's where we started off. And how should we kind of take the versioning forward?
Yeah, so I would say I would not recommend this for any enterprise business, because right now ChatGPT is still in OpenAI's cloud. So I would never recommend an organization to query the data, with their, even if they're hosting the plugin on their backend infrastructure and sending the data back out to OpenAI. So we really won't have generative systems in the enterprise until they can do it internally or have trusted, secure silos inside, or be able to virtualize it yourself in Azure or AWS or some other cloud. Yeah, so right now it's kind of more of a novelty for me. Like I can't recommend, or I could maybe develop this plugin where it would kick off a search in Splunk, but then they would go and handle the output themselves. But as far as putting stuff on GitHub, like the plugin is really simple. It's just a YAML definition, and then the backend that actually basically just does the calls to Splunk to get the data, and then ChatGPT massages the results and does any output. So yeah, but the plugins itself they're very simple.
I don't know if it's similar on the recruitment side, but there have been a lot of tools that claim to leverage generative AI, and when you use them, it does improve your processes. But similar to, like, as a developer, do you think that it will start to create the code for you? Will you not need to be as experienced? I think you just need to adapt, and it will make you faster. It will make you more efficient. I think you'll learn new skills. There's a important part about asking the right questions as well. So I use some of these tools now just to speed up processes, but it still requires me to be involved. I think we're a long way off eliminating, especially in the tech space. But I think with experience, John, you mentioned you haven't got into the weeds for a few years now, but now you're able to kind of leverage this tool to perhaps even get back up to where you were, if not faster or more productive than you was when you were last coding. Yeah,
like C# I picked up just for a tool I was making last year, and the UI was suffering because I don't know any of the UI controls. And then when ChatGPT came about, so on stream, I would basically, I wrote the whole UI with list, grid view, and all that. And ChatGPT was almost perfect, in the output. But as we all know, it hallucinates, makes stuff up. Like there are so many times with like Node.js and Python where it will spit out a library name, which makes perfect logical sense. But you Google it, there's not even one reference. That has never existed, even though it would seem like something like that should exist. It's not out there. So it's just it's not magic. It's just a predictive algorithm. And yeah, so some of the arguments that these large language models are sentient, or and that's, from my experience, I would say that's not the case. But
so would you say that your ability was facilitated? So you came after a long gap between when you were actually hard coding intensively to one where you picked it up. So what skills do you think one would need, because one thing I've heard a lot, and it's also another buzzword that's spreading, is prompt engineering, knowing what to ask, how to ask at each point, because the GenAI, especially ChatGPT like tool, is very interactive. And the more you interact with it, you kind of refine your responses so that you don't get some silly thing. In fact, I know there's a vendor company that I saw the demo, and basically they're training, or maybe it was you, Brian, who's mentioned it. They were training the ChatGPT to self-test. So they give it a validation sample. It goes and runs it, and it keeps running and improving. It's like, training under AI. It keeps rerunning the code till it fits and is able to explain your validation sample. So in a sense, it's going through the iteration process of debugging. So when you talk about a library that didn't exist, it will try to use that library and find it's not valid. And I think from that, but that's what I'm kind of hearing a lot of, is that prompt engineering is something where we really need to skill up from a skill set point of view.
That's actually an interesting, I guess, thought experiment. Is so when like validating the output, like for a library and stuff, and have a plugin that automatically checks to see like what is real and not real in the code. Like if it, because many times I've had it generate code that I can just paste in. Like I need a helper function or something to say, spit out this function. But then the feedback loop to have it write the library that doesn't exist, that it should exist.
Yep.
Maybe. Like, is that kind of where you're going?
Yes, exactly. So it's like a self-learning process and self-testing rather than learning. It's learning through the testing and validation. So it's doing all of it itself. It's, in a Star Trek, when you give it the computer and you say, hey, 0 or 1, life is dead, but you can't kill me. You're supposed to maintain life, one of those famous episodes. And it just goes into the cycle. So in this way, you're really trying to get the system, the algorithm, to remove the weaknesses and retest itself, so that when you come to the final conclusion, this is the best I've got, at least it would be a little better than what you got the first run. So.
Touching on prompt engineering, I can't go into this in too much detail, but I have a client who work in the quantitative space, and I had a particularly experienced gentleman who come from a long-term investment background, very, very talented, very experienced, who had started to delve into generative AI and the kind of tools that could be leveraged in the quant space. He would have been a perfect fit for this business, but the head of machine learning, a guy I've known for many years, has always hired hardcore quants, real heavy statistical individuals on his team. And he actually declined this guy because he was more of a prompt engineer and not someone who really truly understood from the ground up how to develop these models. I think there's probably still some cases where prompt engineering is not going to carry you. You do still need to know how to write the code. So I think.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's something you need to only do, but it's one of the skills all of us probably need to add as an aspect of our skill set.
So I'll chime in there for a second. So I think that's where we look at different companies and their cultures, and we say different companies, different cultures, different people. There's going to be times where, let's say I'm less, sorry, I'm having a driver issue with my webcam here. Let's say there's times where, me personally, I'm not a hardcore engineer, but I would do fine at prompt engineering. I would do fine at automation test writing. If we're in a startup, the four of us, we might say, you know what, Brian, you're what we got, so we're just going to work it for you. Different situations, corporate or what have you, maybe I'm not the right fit for the job, because we need people that are not just automation testers or prompt engineers. Maybe we need full stack developers, for instance. What I'm getting to is I think we're going to find, as this space gets a little more settled, we're going to find which low code tools are really solid, which are the best low code tools. We're going to figure out which tools, like ChatGPT, what are the right generative AI tools. I guess my son wants to make an appearance. What are you doing, buddy? Anyway, it's an interesting topic. I'm going to go on mute for a second here.
Okay. So go ahead.
I was actually just going to ask you, Priya, if you had any good use cases that spring to mind for genAI, businesses that may be using this already, that have publicly shared their findings, the impact, that kind of stuff. Do you know any off the top of your head that might be worth?
Yeah, so there are a lot of companies are, first of all, getting into building their own large LLM models, right? They're building their own algorithms. So, I mean, you know the Googles of the world, the Bards and there's Lambdas and Baidu's, and all these huge. Meta is building its own. So each company is coming up with its own. This is like a standard, non-standard. It's going to be like, Apple adapters. Each one is different. And so they are using it and they are fine-tuning it to their own needs, right? The same thing happened with cloud technology before, and not the cloud, the big data technology. Each one came up with something that fit their needs. So the question is which one will survive. But from outside of those big companies, builders, developers, companies are using it in sales and marketing in the way that Brian described it. It's like the least risky aspect, creating self-service reporting. Okay, so that'd be the one. Now, part of Gen AI is its ability to do NLP programming. So when you think about the chatbots or the customer service area, now they can be enhanced with more information and respond in a much more smarter, intelligent ways. So contact centers and support services, that is where they're trying to kind of use it. So those are more of these personalization, recommendations, creating that first draft, as John did, of scripting, of coding, or even a contact center script. What should we ask? So those are being in use in some ways from an AI point of view, but now we have LLMs that are using much more wider net of data to pull the information and to get a response. So there we go. Brian, you want to explain?
Go
ahead.
Yeah. So one of the, do you want me to just go into that one circumstance that we're
exactly.
using?
Yeah.
So utility company, what's interesting in our space, customers don't have a choice who they use for their utility provider. So we're the provider for many citizens of Massachusetts and upstate New York and Long Island for electric and natural gas. We are exploring how can we optimize our operations, how can we use more big data, how can we give more insights. And so we're building multiple tools. One of the tools we're working with is it's with Azure OpenAI connections, and using that Azure OpenAI service, we have set up for a mailbox where a customer would email a paper document like a fax, or they might email us and say, hey, I'm moving soon. I want to change, can I change my address for my account to such and such? So it's just an open email. it might be a form that they fill out, and the form says, you know, I want to switch to this rate. Here's how I qualify, etc. And there's many different email boxes. I think there's 60 or something. So what we're doing is we're setting up the Azure OpenAI service to read the subject and the body of the email from one specific email inbox. And then there's 60 different inboxes that we're working through. But the one inbox is, let's say it's change my account information. So if you email change my account at nationalgrid.com, you, not that exact email, but like that exact email, then generative AI, Azure OpenAI, would parse that content and then determine, okay, it's this customer, this address, they typed the zip code wrong, but it should be this zip code. And then it's going to give that information with the planned solution and the email response generated to the customer service rep. The way we've set it up right now is the CS rep would say, I want to double check this before I complete it. But what's nice about that, it takes me back to a Simpsons episode where Homer finds that he can get his job done by having a little Tweety bird click the any button over and over and over. And kind of like that, what's exciting here is if we can teach the system to handle, you know, let's say 200 requests a day, we can really, you know, 10x the abilities of our customer service team. The customer service team can then work on triaging more difficult challenges. They can work on deeper connections with the customer. They can work on, you know, more urgent, more challenging, you know, those tier 2, tier 3 type solutions. So if we can really, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our tier 1 customer service, customer engagement to be done, you know, like 80% of the job done by generative AI. So it's pretty exciting. Now that might seem like a really simple use case. It's not a sentient generative AI by any means, but it is. I think it's a good, you know, machine learning type of a circumstance.
And Brian, machine learning is the precursor for Gen AI anyways. I mean, there is a lot of the machine learning that in the part of the algorithm that is going and repeating and iterating. So that's where you start, because to jump to a LLM kind of a model is not simple. And that's why I'm going to make the statement that before we had big data and we kind of were okay using predictive modeling, you kind of base that on looking back in history, looking at data and saying, what do I expect to happen in future? An LLM model is doing just that, right? It is looking at data that you have, and based on the data, through iteration, it's learning and trying to become smarter, and then giving you a recommendation, an opinion, or a response. So you have to train it. And what you're doing and what you just said is that initial piece, because until you're confident about what it is that you're developing, you can't put it on steroids and say, okay, go, I'm not going to look at you.
Well, and I think the cool thing there, Priya, in that circumstance, and I do want to open it back up to others, John maybe, but for me, what's cool is we didn't train it.
Yes.
So it was smart enough to start, which is nice because we didn't have to say the account number is 11 digits. It starts with a 0 or you know, what have you. It ascertained where the account number was based on the language that was given it. Now, that is from machine learning, that is from prompt engineering that was put into its way of computing, analyzing. But the nice thing there is all that legwork to do the first one was we just set the plugin in and it, you know, it could figure it out. So, you know, obviously the level of error continues to go down as you keep teaching it where it has an error. But the nice thing there was we didn't have to do the first one. You know, it was smart enough smart enough to get started. So, wow.
This
So
may,
John,
this
oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
this may seem like a silly, but it's a quick question. Prior to you introducing ChatGPT to that process, did you just have a regular machine learning model that was doing that to some degree, or was that someone physically sitting there manually?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. A team. So what's nice is that team is really excited to use this, because then they're able to open up their workload to those tier 2. This is not a tier 2 circumstance, right? This is a, this is a ServiceNow request, more or less. But instead of a request where you fill in 5 boxes and click go, we're allowing customers to send an email or to send a fax, which ends up going to an email box. So because we don't, because we're still giving, we're regulated, we have to give customers multiple ways of communicating with us, and these are open ways with our regulatory. But then that's enabling those customers to be served, even amidst the constraint of, yeah. So it's not the kind of job I would want to do 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'll tell you that for sure.
I like that on the both.
It's doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah. On the back end and the front end, there's time saved, productivity, time gained. From a ROI perspective, just measuring that, how are you going to measure that? Are you looking at the productivity that comes from the teams that are now having way more free time or able to tackle more challenges?
No, yeah. So a big part of this, Lewis, is it's not as much freeing them up. It's more so they're overloaded, and we have some folks that are looking to move into different areas, grow their careers, what have you. This allows that team to do more with a more specialized team. It allows the individuals on the team to specialize in those tier 2 areas where they are most excited, most passionate. It allows some people to transition out and then not need to be backfilled. So, the team, I'm not going to give the numbers, but let's say the team is 20 people. We might be able to serve the customer base with 10 people. And then we might be able to really have those 10 individuals go into different tier 2 service realms. And then in, let's say, 2 hours of work, they're actually doing the workload of 2 people 8 hours a day. So we're kind of, it's kind of a 10-to-1 multiplier there. Now we're still experimenting that. We're figuring out, what's best. And this is just one circumstance, but this is one circumstance that we see there's immediate benefit from using the generative AI. Because one of the things that we've struggled is the wrong word, but delved into and not known where to go, is how do you productize this thing? It's really cool if you want to ask, like, what kind of lawnmower should I have? I have half an acre grass. I live in Minnesota. That thing's going to spit out, there's these lawnmowers. Here's the reviews. If you like consumer reports, this is the review that I would go to. If you like, a different reviewer, try out these YouTubes. But for the common, like in our industry, for the utility experience, we really don't have a, like, how do you save money on energy? Well, it's a little bit too much of a Pandora's box right now for generative AI to answer that question. So what we're finding is, what's the right way for OpenAI or generative AI or ChatGPT to help our customers in material ways, both internal customers and extra, folks that we serve. So, yeah. John, I had a question for you. So for me, the Splunk experience, it's kind of I found the tool, we used it at US Bank, very, very cool. Once you have it set up, once you set it up right, you can do some phenomenal things. The way that you've explained it to me, it sounds like that, I'll call it extensions that you've set up, they're probably allowing folks to speed to value a little faster with Splunk. Is that like it sounds like a little bit of a surgical approach to using the tooling to get quick benefit. Would you say that? Is that fair? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. So Splunk, the SPL, their search syntax, there's a learning curve. So you can do simple, just single keyword searches like on Google, but to do like sub searches and joins and unions and set differences and stuff like that, you have to, it takes years of experience to get good at really, finding the data you want. So, but Elasticsearch, Elk, it would be just as easy to write a plugin for that. So what's just the Splunk platform itself, when it comes to big data, in my opinion, its most powerful feature is with schema at read, so at search time. So the only thing you really need for Splunk is just to write it to disk with event breaking and timestamps. So it's time sequence data, but it also can pull data from relational databases, Elk or Elasticsearch, and bring that in. So the plugin basically the search can be as complex or simple, whatever ChatGPT generates, to either discover more information about your data or what's in the data itself, like the data you have, like even a SQL database. You could easily write a ChatGPT plugin to say, what tables do I have? Read the schema, and I want to find this data, and it would probably generate a SQL query for you, like that sort of thing. So I haven't seen anything for SQL yet, but I don't think it would be very hard to do that either.
So that's really powerful, because that kind of talks a little bit about citizen development as well, John, because the way I see that, that's years ago, a lot of times as IT professionals were asked, just figure out how to get this in Excel so that I can work with it. And similarly here, getting the Splunk data, the log information into a SQL view, then publishing that to Power BI, that's a really simple flow where you can make that useful for the person who can act on that, rather than IT sit kind of in a silo, and then IT can only tell the business what IT wants to tell the business about the events and the logging. I think the nice thing there is if you get the dashboard out to the business person, out to the CIO, so the CIO can show it to the CEO or what have you, then it allows IT to really so much more serve the organization and be like front and center, rather than kind of behind the I don't know, behind, in the back room, in a sense. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I would say that. So Microsoft actually has something very close to Splunk called Microsoft Sentinel, which the search syntax is actually very close. So they're so like when it comes to like Power BI or other data presentation layers, like for executive level, so Splunk solves that in the full stack, where you can do dashboards and rich interfaces on the data very easily as well. And it's basically just XML. So you could have ChatGPT generate the dashboard XML. And if you develop the plugin, could do the API calls to automatically create that in Splunk. So
nice.
Where I don't think, like I said, I'm still not ready to recommend clients to pull data into ChatGPT to do analysis.
No.
Like that's still out there.
And John, something that I've been telling people, and I don't know Priya and Lewis, but something I've been telling to people is don't just throw stuff into ChatGPT. Get your own instance, put OpenAI on something, get a tool where you have your own instance, where you're not just throwing it into the collective. If you want to keep your data yours, set up your own instance. Don't just.
So I have a question for you about having your own instance. So when you use ChatGPT, use their model is based on data from September 2021. It
The
costs
3.5
them.
is the 3.5 is yeah.
Well, no, even 4.5. If the data,
Okay.
the model is the same,
Yeah.
and it took them months and millions of dollars of compute to generate that model. They boiled down about 800 some gigabytes of curated data to a model that's only like 2 or 3 gigabytes, but that's their proprietary model. It's not released anywhere.
Right.
Their inference engine, what they've been doing is improving their inference, the front end part of it, from my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, but other large language models like Bard, Google Bard, they actually incorporate. I don't know if how they retrain current data and events into it, but they do. So I don't have experience with any other large language models. So I was wondering if any of you did, to talk about, like, some people think, oh, I can just train, get a data set, train it on my RTX 40,000 series video card. It's just not going to work. You'll never be able to grind through, it would take you, tens of years to do it by yourself. Even if you had the curated data set.
So one thing that comes to my mind is this is still so much evolving, it's not there, it's not reached the stability point. For a enterprise to kind of bring it into the inside the firewall to focus on its internal data sets, not having to depend upon a public going out and into the big data space outside the firewall, question becomes how effective it can be, how a large language model will work in a small data environment. I mean, it could be tuned in, and I think so. When you talk about citizen development, Brian, there is the one that is what John did, is probably can contribute to speed up Splunk in their development process. They might take his idea and say, hey, this is cool, let's build something like this, because a customer, there is a need. There's a need for somebody like John. There may be multiple Johns there, and this could become a product, and we can kind of make it more version control, manage, and sell it as a product. So John has essentially done R&D work that Splunk didn't have to do. So that could be an option. But internally, what does that mean? Because it's going to be a longer, the accuracy of that model and the training has to be very customized to the internal enterprise needs. And I don't know, and doing citizen development under those more restrictive circumstances is going to be a very different ball game than what John did.
So specifically, John, to your question, I don't know well enough to say. You want to make an appearance, son? You just want to see these guys? I don't know enough to say, but what I've been seeing is what I've been hearing is we don't want to give our social security number directly on ChatGPT. We want to. So I'm seeing folks that I think it's best that you can get your own licensing and have what OpenAI set up, and then work with that. But I need to learn more.
So
I need to learn more about it.
When you're talking about OpenAI and Azure, is that basically doing like API calls to ChatGPT, OpenAI?
Yeah. So I think that's part of the big. I don't work for Microsoft, but what I'm seeing, what we've used at National Grid is we have Azure, we have I think it's either the E3 or E5 license of Microsoft. So what we've seen is, we can just plug OpenAI right in and sorry, not ChatGPT, but GPT-4 from OpenAI right in, and then it's in-house OpenAI. Now I don't know how, when we went from 3.5 to 4, how does that work? How do we upconvert our own essentially prompt engineering? But I mean, it's been working well for us. Something that really struck my fancy, John, early on, I want to say it was Goldman Sachs, one of the big investment banks, months ago, April, I think, they unleashed a OpenAI tool for their investment bankers so that their investment bankers could share investment banking information across other folks, advisors, and then advisors could have different, like a similar Monte Carlo analysis so that they could use that type of knowledge sharing across their organization. I'm going to try and find it on Google and put it in the chat, John, because it was a very interesting use case.
And then another use case I've been using ChatGPT for. So on my Twitch stream, I have it moderate chat. So I give it a prompt. You're the moderator for a channel called Security Live. Ban people, respond with certain messages like ban, timeout, upvote, or downvote.
Yeah. And
then I'll basically have a node red flow that takes those results and then takes action using the Twitch API to ban, timeout. And then I have a TTS client, then it upvotes comments to speak and comments, to not speak for the TTS. So that was I was able to put that together in a very short period of time.
I just wanted to jump in. I think we're kind of edging towards the end of the conversation, but also wanted to express the fact that it's not the end of the conversation. If you want to continue talking to all of us on here, our doors are open. We're all excited to chat. But I'm just curious to see if everyone's got kind of like a closing statement that we want to leave this on.
Okay, I can go first. I'll let Brian do the end of the end.
Okay.
So, I think from what we have discussed, definitely there is scope, there is a viable option to make citizen development happen. It's in its early stages. It certainly raises issues on the governance space, which is something that we've had to deal with in previous waves of technology change, is standardization, and so that there is a more of compatibility, more of sharing, more of reusing what is built through the citizen development. And I think while we are seeing there is a need for certain skill sets, and it's also taking over the not needing certain skill sets. So it makes things easier and makes you productive, even if you're not like a specialist. There is something to be had from what Lois, you said, as a recruiting tool, as a skill set. You still need that understanding. The basic foundational is needed. We can't do without it, but we have to layer it with some newer skills that are more catered towards this new technology that we have to learn to master. So I think that's where I would stop.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement. Certainly from the recruitment perspective, it's made me as an individual way more efficient when it comes to tasks that typically I don't like doing. And it's just made me much better at them as well. It doesn't eliminate the human element to my role at all. It just means that I get to that conversation way quicker than I would if I'd spent a day trying to build effective lists that tomorrow I can start to work through. Now I can do them in 5 minutes. But I do have to ask the right questions from a prompt recruitment perspective. I have to ask it the right questions to build me the right lists to ultimately get the most accurate results. And that took, not complex, it took some upskilling. And, I had to ask other peers in the recruitment space what they were asking the tool to get the results they was. So yeah, I'm personally not concerned about it taking my job, but I love the fact that it's made me way more efficient and way faster. And there are tasks that it saves me tons and tons of time on. So I'm really open to seeing how I can continue to use it and adapt it in my space. I think I've found a ceiling right now until someone tells me that there's another way I can use it. But it really helps me in my day-to-day.
So I'm actually going to go ahead, if that's okay, Lewis. Really loved what you said there. Because John, I'm actually curious if you'd like to close.
Yeah, I will.
So what's cool here is through this chat, there's so much to learn, right? And we're each going to use it in different ways. And even just during this chat, I've changed some of the thinking on how I want to use it. Like John, as you were talking about the OpenAI that would help you moderate during a Twitch live stream, like something simple like an email client add-in. So Microsoft's adding Copilot to Excel and PowerPoint. Well, when I get Copilot in Outlook, I'm really looking forward to, what are the 5 emails that I should really focus on out of the 200? Because that's just going to make it easier. Or just all of those, like if you go back and you watch the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix, and you watch it now that ChatGPT is out in the wild, I think it changes your I think it kind of shifts our curiosity a little bit to, oh, this is kind of here already. So something that I've been chewing on is, I think if anybody wants to listen to this later, something I would like to share is don't be scared of these new technologies. Look at them as a better search. And hopefully that's just one step that makes it easier to do what you normally do. Because I'm finding it's very powerful, but it's also very overwhelming if you try to make it do something really difficult to do. So if you can just use it for something simple and start using it, get more comfortable using it, I think it makes it easier for me personally to start embracing it and work with it.
I think it's important to encourage people to figure out how to use it though. Like, don't not use it.
Oh yeah,
because you'll get left behind. I think it is important to really figure out how you can encompass that in your day-to-day somehow, or at least learn how to.
Well, in a simple way, Lewis, is, you can just turn it on in Google Labs. So right away in Google, you can turn BART on. It's really easy. Or in Bing search, you can, it's right there. So the nice thing is those 2 search engines, they've made it easy to consume right away, where you don't have to go out, get a ChatGPT account, and then use it on a different, a separate search experience. So yeah.
John?
Yeah, so I would say in cybersecurity, so I've been doing cybersecurity, information security for about 12 years. I started at a local company in Minnesota called Digital River. So I was a second shift Unix admin, and they're like, we need another AppSec guy. So they threw me to the wolves and said, you now manage web application firewall, static, dynamic analysis, and manual code review findings. And I was just kind of like deer in headlights. So I had to learn the vendor landscape, the tools, right? There's no, even on Google, like the pages at the time, like a lot of the companies didn't have free versions to try stuff out. So we would do months-long POCs with different web application firewalls, et cetera. So long story short, what I've found is I've been using it to even research vendors. Like, what should I look for in a web application firewall? What are the top web application firewall vendors? And it's been very good. So I do have the experience to know, when it's kind of off, but, and that's one thing, at least 12 years ago, there weren't application security programs that teach you these things, like Imperva, F5, ASM, like what are these things? Even computer science programs 10 years ago had no security track for vulnerabilities and things. And if you don't know what a security vulnerability is, like if you Google something, you'll get a list of pages and you might find something on Stack Overflow or whatever, but you could actually ask ChatGPT, show me an example of a cross-site scripting vulnerability and explain it. And it's concise, it's nice. And then just to close off talking about automation and low code and coding. So I've now worked in probably about 15 Fortune 500 companies since I've been an independent consultant over the past 8 years. And a lot of the cybersecurity entry-level position, they're not computer science. They have security specific training for, malware analysis sometimes, or triage, penetration testing. And they know some scripting and things like that, but not, true code, like coding concepts. So this ChatGPT and other large language models to help entry level or those who may not have the coding skill set to be able to develop APIs and things like that. Because that's one of the things I've had to do over and over is getting data into Splunk or kicking off something in an external system, writing API integrations to do that, and having to engage like the development team or even like your data science team to get data you want sometimes takes months in these large organizations and lots of meetings. So so Node-RED, I'm a big Splunk evangelist. I'm not paid by Splunk or anything like that. I just been using it for so long. And Node-RED is an open source, initially developed by someone at IBM, and it's open source. And so I encourage everyone to check out Node-RED because it actually brings the promise of multi-platform, any system API and integrations. And then they have an enterprise offering called FlowForge, which is also open source. So you can use it free, but it containerizes the Node-RED deployments as individual applications. So then you can scale it and manage it at scale in the enterprise as well. So I don't have any fish in the enterprise that have paid me to implement this yet, but it for security automation, it's the direction that I'm going.
So basically, John, would you say you're up for any job now that you have ChatGPT?
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
The confidence.
I think I can actually, commit to more things. Yeah. Like things that, you want to do, but, you don't have time to do. It's like, well, I could also do this, this, and this.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Don't overcommit and underdeliver.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, it was excellent time. Thank you, everybody. John, it was great to have you joining us. I'm so glad you were able.
Yeah,
Louis,
nice to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all.
Priya,
thanks for Priya and Brian.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with the fact that we were able to do this. Anyone who's interested, I'm going to quick plug Data Leaders USA. Anyone who's interested that's leading data-centric organizations in the USA that wants to connect with people like Brian, people like Priya, at the top tier level of data, then reach out and we can get you signed up. Got over 500, almost 500 members now in 5 months. So we're growing fast. All right.
Your leadership, Louis. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks. Bye.